Game collecting, the fantastic hobby we all love to spend way too much money on. The act of going to your favourite game shop, finding a game complete with the manual you've been searching for ages, only to add it to your shelf and your never ending list of games you hope to one day experience, known as the dreaded backlog. While this hobby is something we all enjoy partaking in, I do feel that the current state of game collecting has changed in the last 12 to 18 months since I started collecting games back in around 2015. And in this video today I'm going to go over the current state of game collecting in 2024 and where I see it heading. Now, just before we get to the reasons, I feel that it is important to define what the act of collecting is. To collect is to bring or gather together a number of things in a similar location. If we take that meaning and apply it to game collecting, we can say that game collecting is the process of gathering video games, consoles and other related gaming items into a single place such as a games room. Now that we've got all the preamble out the way, let's dive into the first major point, which is a shift to an all digital gaming world. This is a trend that's been growing over the last few years, especially with the latest console generation like the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, where both have an all digital option. And this move to a more digital world is something that has huge implications for game collectors. So, what's the difference between owning a game physically and digitally? It's simple. When you buy a game digitally, you're not purchasing the actual game, you're buying a license to access the game on a server floating somewhere up there in the cloud. For example, if you buy a game on Steam or the PlayStation Store, you don't physically own it, you just have the permission to play it as long as that platform exists. Contrast this with a physical game where you get something tangible, something you can hold in your hands, lend to a friend, sell it when you're done, or proudly display it on your shelf as long as you want. When you pay for a physical game, it's yours completely. With a physical game, the whole game is, hopefully, preserved in its final form, which means that the game can be enjoyed entirely from the disc with no internet connection required. With digital games though, you only have access to get that game for as long as that platform allows you to access it. We've already seen games removed from digital stores. Take Spec Ops: The Line, which was taken down due to licensing issues related to music. Once that happened, the price of physical games skyrocketed from £2 to £3 to £20 almost overnight for Spec Ops: The Line. This is one of the reasons why I avoid digital games. Why would I pay for something that exists on a cloud somewhere, knowing it could disappear any time for me no longer to access? We're also seeing game companies moving away from physical releases altogether. This year alone, Xbox released Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 as a digital only title. For some games, Xbox are releasing some games physically through limited run games, which only print a set number of copies. After the initial run has ended on limited run, you are left to bid it out with scalpers on eBay to try and snag a copy where you are normally paying over the odds. It's crazy to think that a company such as Xbox are no longer releasing physical games for its first party releases. But when companies release physical games for modern releases, the disc is nothing more than a coaster, as the disc only contains a small portion of the game, requiring you to download the rest through updates and patches via an internet connection. The disc is only used to check if you have the right to access and play the game. So, when the servers eventually shut down, who knows what will happen with the game disc? Does it become obsolete and stop working? Only time will tell. We saw this recently with the announcement of the PlayStation 5 Pro, which is a digital first console with an optional £100 disc drive add-on. I believe this is going to be the future for the next set of consoles, where you will be required to purchase an add-on to simply play games from a disc physically. This is awful going forward because it means your entire collection becomes obsolete. So what does this mean for collectors? In short, the value of physical games is going to keep going up and up and up and rising. With the recent closure of the Xbox 360 digital store, we've already seen the prices of physical copies for that system spike massively. Games that used to be cheap are now much more expensive, driven by the fear that players won't be able to experience them anymore. As physical games become a relics of a bygone era, their value is only going to continue to increase massively, making retro game collecting more and more expensive than ever before. Talking about retro games getting more expensive, that brings me to our next point. As we've all noticed with the cost of living crisis, everything has become more expensive in recent years, not just retro video games. Even the Friday Big Shop at the local supermarket cost a fortune. I mean, it's a joke now about the price of food, but I'm ranting, and that's a conversation for a completely different day. But before diving deeper, let's quickly outline what I mean by retro video games. The general consensus is that for something to be considered retro, it needs to be at least 20 years old. So we're talking about games consoles from 2004 and earlier. Since 2020, when retro game collecting boomed during the pandemic, prices for retro games have continued to spiral massively upwards. There's no sign of this coming down anytime soon, and no sign of there being a crash within the retro game market. Let's take a look at a couple of examples at Price Charting, a great site for tracking game prices over time. A copy of Silent Hill for the PlayStation 1, which I recently picked up for £100 from CEX, would have set you back around £30 to £40 at the start of 2020, but now it's £105 at CEX and regularly sells for around £110 to £120 on eBay. That's insane. That's a 200% price increase in just over 4 years, and with the upcoming Silent Hill 2 remake for the PlayStation 5, those prices are only going to continue to rise. If you're looking to get into retro game collecting and you're interested in collecting for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 generation or older, you're going to be paying quite a lot for some of those more rarer, more desirable games or items. But why are retro games so expensive? Like everything in this world, the simple answer is supply and demand. During the pandemic, when everyone was cooped up at home with nothing to do, people turned to video games to escape the chaos around them. They sought comfort in the games that were nostalgic for them and took them back to a more innocent time away from the craziness happening during the pandemic. As a result of this, the demand for retro games skyrocketed. Meanwhile, the supply is limited. These games are only getting older and are no longer being manufactured by game publishers, and their age makes them harder to find in good condition complete in box with a manual. This nostalgia bubble hasn't popped, which is why retro games remain so expensive and why their prices will likely continue to rise or at least stay very high. Video games have become a valuable commodity for people looking to make a quick buck. At all the car booth sales I attend, I see people of all ages, backgrounds, male, female, people from 15, 16 all the way up to 80, hunting for video games and consoles. This is because they know there's money to be made in what were once considered worthless relics. Reselling has also become a much more viable source of income, with many people doing this as their full-time job, and video games are a quick and easy way for resellers to make money because the demand is there for them. People buying these games generally fall into three categories. The first are those who want to relive the gaming memories they had as children. The second group are hardcore collectors who treat video game collecting like trading cards. They want the rarest games and all the different variants of particular titles. The final group, and this is something I've noticed in more recent times, are those people who see video games as an investment commodity, something to stash in the loft in hopes of turning a profit later on, much like stocks and shares. I'll discuss purchasing games as an investment in my next point, but all of this indicates that retro video game collecting will continue to be an expensive hobby for the foreseeable future, and for those people seeking the more rarer and more harder to obtain video game items. In my next point, I want to discuss the recent trend that we've been seeing with people buying games as an investment, hoping they'll one day increase in price. Video games are no longer bought solely for their primary purpose of playing them. Like other valuable collectibles such as Lego and trading cards, people are now purchasing video games as an investment for the future. Even popular YouTube game collectors such as Retro Ghetto have a series about games to invest in, and other channels such as Kale often mentions in his videos how many of his expensive games are justified as investments, with the expectation that their value will only continue to go up and up. This is something I don't personally buy into. I don't see video games as a way to boost my investment portfolio, and I don't believe it's a smart financial decision to purchase games in the hope they'll increase in value. This is just my opinion though. This isn't financial advice, so don't take my word as gospel. The first reason why investing in games is a poor financial decision is the validity of the gaming industry. None of us can predict what's around the corner in terms of upcoming releases and how they might impact the market. Let's take one of my more expensive games in my collection, Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door for the GameCube. I bought this for £115 back at the start of 2023. It showed no sign of dropping in price due to the high demand for GameCube games and the limited quantity of GameCube games due to the poor sales of this console. But then, 6 months later, a remake was announced for the Nintendo Switch, and suddenly, the GameCube version dropped massively in price. The GameCube version can now be bought for a mere £65, almost half of what I paid for just a year ago. There's a strong chance it may never return to the £115 I paid for, since a better version of the game is now available on the more accessible Nintendo Switch. The demand for the GameCube version has significantly decreased. If I had bought this game as an investment, I would have lost £55 with no way to recoup that loss. So, before buying a game as an investment, give it some thought. You never know what's around the corner in the gaming world. You might say, of course Paper Mario is always going to get a remake. It's a first party Mario game that fans have been clamouring for absolutely years. But what about a rarer game? Something that was so expensive, many collectors could only dream of obtaining. It was a grail, a unicorn item, something to strive for. Let's have a look at the Rule of Rose for the PlayStation 2. This obscure horror game, banned in certain countries due to its themes, sat at around £250 at the start of 2020. However, by the start of 2024 it shot up to £500, with mint copies going for over £600. This was due to the seemingly limited quantity of games available and the notion in the video game collecting scene that this was a rare game due to the limited quantity and the poor sales of this video game due to its controversial nature and themes. But then, in September 2024, a shipment of sealed UK PAL copies was found in a warehouse somewhere in Italy and were being sold for a fraction of the price on eBay. This influx of copies tanked the game's price massively, flooding eBay, CEX and other stores with sealed versions. I went from never seeing this game in my 10 years of collecting to seeing 4 copies in my local CEX in just the last few weeks. Imagine buying Rule of the Rose as an investment back in 2020, thinking it was a sure bet to only go up. You'd be absolutely gutted. Who knows, the game might go back in value eventually, but it's more likely to sit around £300 to £400 for the foreseeable future. There are also simply much more reliable ways to invest your money if you're looking to increase your money. As someone who invests in the stock market, index funds and cryptocurrency on a regular basis, I've seen much better returns in those areas than with any game in my collection. Take another expensive game in my collection, Fire Emblem Path of Radiance for the GameCube. This game cost me £200 a few years ago. Let's say for example I'd bought this game back when it released in 2005 for around £50. That would be a £150 return over nearly 20 years. But if I would have taken that same £50 in 2005 and invested it into the S&P 500 instead, which is the American index stock market, it would now be worth around £250, assuming that an 8% annual return with dividends reinvested. And then there's always a risk that Path of Radiance could be remade someday for the Nintendo Switch or future Nintendo consoles. This would massively slash the price of my GameCube copy. My point is, if making money is your priority, there are far more reliable investment opportunities out there. My stance is to buy games you're generally excited to play or games you hold a deep attachment to. If they increase in value, great, but if they don't, who cares? You still have the memories of an amazing video game or the opportunity to create brand new memories. In my humble opinion, I wouldn't even care if there was a law requiring all retro games of a certain age to be sold at a flat rate of £20. This would be amazing. It would allow more people to play some of the more expensive games. My final point on where I see retro game collecting heading in the next few years is largely influenced by the growing number of influencers documenting their collecting journeys on social media platforms such as YouTube and Instagram. We live in a digital world where everyone shares their lives online, and this can have both positive and negative impacts on the way we collect retro video games. On the positive side, social media offers increased visibility and helps you discover new games you might never have heard of. A large portion of my collection has come from recommendations on various social media platforms. There are also tons of reviews available for almost any game, which makes purchasing decisions less risky since you can easily find out if a game suits your interests. Social media also creates a sense of community. It provides a platform for collectors to share their goals and experiences with a wider audience, which I think is one of the most amazing aspects of being part of a collecting community. It's actually one of the reasons why I started this YouTube channel. I wanted to build a safe space where everyone is welcome to share their collecting journeys and to show that collecting doesn't have to break the bank. By using car boot sales and other affordable options, you can offset the often high cost of retro game collecting by buying things for cheap and flipping them into CX for those sweet vouchers. On the flip side, there were some negatives to how social media influences collecting habits. In the past, I would often feel envious of other people's collections and would change my own habits to match what seemed popular. I thought that to be a true collector, you had to go for full sets or only focus on the most expensive, rarest games. But this is just BS. Every collector's journey is unique to them. Like we said at the start of this video, a game collector is simply someone who amasses games in a single location. The value or rarity of those games doesn't determine whether you're a true collector. Don't let me or anyone else influence your collecting journey or take away your joy. That's why I say at the end of all my videos, good luck on your game hunts and your collecting adventures, because collecting is truly an adventure. It takes many paths and it's your adventure. You might veer off course now and then, but as long as you stay true to yourself and collect games you're generally excited about, this hobby will bring you joy for many years to come. I've seen people collect games basically sold on the colour of their spine or how they look on the shelf. Channels such as Retro Ghetto have popularised the idea of going for full sets or full subsets, like the PlayStation 3 Essentials set with their distinctive red spines. This is no hate towards Retro Ghetto, I absolutely love that channel and watch it religiously, but without Callum documenting his PlayStation 3 Essential journey, I doubt we'd see so many people suddenly going after this subset of games. Ironically, even Callum has said himself that this was his hardest full set to obtain. This probably means most people will end up with incomplete sets, which is more annoying than anything. So, are these collectors interested in the games themselves, or just following what a popular collector on YouTube is doing? At the end of the day, the most important thing is to stay true to why you're collecting in the first place. Don't feel pressured to chase trends or to spend more than you can afford just because others are doing it. Collect the games you love, the ones that bring back memories or often new ones. Remember, whether your collection is big, small, rare or common, it's your collection and that's what makes it special. Share your collection with others on social media, become inspired by social media, but remember, your collection is that. It's your collection, and don't let anyone dictate how you should collect. But those are just one man's opinion on the direction game collecting is headed for in the future. I still absolutely love game collecting. It transports me to a more comfortable, stress-free world away from the deadlines of work or the troubles of just trying to figure out what this entire thing of life means. I'll always be a game collector and a gamer, but I think it's interesting to see what shapes how we collect and how it might evolve going forward. Now, I definitely want to hear what you have to say in the comments down below. Do you agree with some of my points? Or do you think I'm way off? Let's start a civil conversation about the hobby we all love down in the comments down below. And while you're down there, if you enjoyed this video, then please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the Collector's Quest channel, where you'll find a variety of car boot hunting videos, pickup videos and game route tours, with plenty more to come in the future. And like I always say, good luck on your game hunting and collecting adventures. Take it easy YouTube, and I'll catch you in the next one.